Welcome in, everybody, for another episode of Compounding Interest. It's your boy Joey. What we want to do starting each and every single week is dive in with our standings throughout our Dragon League, dive into our Penny Pincher series, take a look at the remaining teams throughout Dragon, and give our week 4 predictions going into next week. But as it currently stands, we have one team at the top, 3-0. No sense to harp on it, don't like to brag. But what you see in the middle is what you hear a soup group, if you will, in terms of it looks like 6 teams that either have a record of 2-1 or 1-2 who really haven't had a chance to separate themselves for the worse and for the better. But starting at tied for second, we still have the Frauds, the Engineers, and the Frigs. I think a dark horse coming that most folks did not see, but a lot of kudos to that team. We have 3 teams tied for fifth at 1-2, the Drizzlers, the Ewoks, and the Cheesers. I think if anybody would have anticipated to have those 3 teams in the same group at any week during the season, it might have been maybe after week 1. So the fact that 3 weeks have gone on now and they're still tied has a lot to say. I don't know about what about which team, but I'll let you all interpret that. And then finally, you do have the Beaver Battalion. Somebody has to be last, and unfortunately, it's our Canadian brethren at 0-3. Still think they put up a solid performance, which we'll dive into later, but that's currently how we stand in the Dragon League, diving into week 4. Taking a look at the Penny Pincher matchup against the Engineers in week 3. Let me move my camera. First, want to dive into what our thoughts were heading into the series. I think it screams off the page that this was a very strong jungle support duo for this team that plays a lot of enabling playmakers that, regardless of how strong the carries are going to be, it's going to set them up well to execute on that game plan. And going into it, a lot of prep during the week, our thoughts were, probably need to throw a lot of bans at jungle and support to really make sure they're not getting their comfort picks. Unfortunately, that's not how it played out for either game, but especially for game 1, only being able to ban the Talia. There definitely was some instant panic and thinking on our feet for that one, but we'll dive into the draft here for game 1. Want to give a shout out to Frog. Thank God he is willing to be one in ADC every single week. And this is going to be anywhere from a scaling ADC to putting him on prio to enable the jungler or get Clue the support out on the map. Just a lot of kudos to Frog, and want to make sure to shout that out. J4 here on B2 definitely feels a little bit more like a suicidal pick, if you will, where I knew I was going to be going in and not very confident I'd be getting back out. But seeing the Ivern Sivir anticipated that there wasn't a lot of other picks that would be able to put on the amount of pressure I was looking for. So was comfortable with this pick, but definitely was very risky in terms of how it would play out. Another shout out, and this is going to be the theme, I think, of the entire week for the Penny Pinchers. We saw it on stream, but Lulu Top. This was something that we talked about before draft even started in terms of what Fanfear was super comfortable on, what they'd be able to really just step in and step out on. And this was something that, with the proper scouting in place, and I know it's super hard when, for both teams, when an E-sub jumps in, you have to quick 5-minute scramble. What do they play? What are they comfortable on? You can see it in the round 2 bans in terms of the Jax, the Olaf. It was a conscious decision by the Engineers. What the hell? This guy plays Lulu top? We're going to let this through. Which, in hindsight, if you have something picked into it, makes a lot of sense. And I think the right mindset is picking something that scales into that with the limited amount of pressure. Well, it just didn't come out to fruition in terms of picking the Gwen with that mindset of being able to survive the lane, and that just did not happen. Now, I think this was some really good just execution in terms of pulling the Ivern down to the constant action happening bot side to where the Gwen could not get bailed out to scale into that potential monster that she could have became. But in general, that Lulu top is going to go down in the history books for Scuttle, so super excited by that. Another pick I wanted to highlight is the Morgana for the Engineers. I think at this point, a lot of folks are liking to pick that on red specifically because it gives you that extra flexibility, especially with having R5 counter pick. But I think everybody's caught on, especially in Scuttle, that Morgana is going to be going mid. 95% of the time. Yes, I think if there's going to be a support to pull that out, it is going to be Silver Spades in the bot lane. But especially into a J4, I just don't think that makes a lot of sense. You're going to want some engaged peel. So we saw that coming mid lane pretty much from a mile away. And I think this comp is just super hard to execute for the engineers. I think the Ivern Sivir makes a ton of sense. And even the Morgana slots in. I think for me, where it comes down to is there's just so much pressure on one, the Gwen to survive the lane and become the late game monster she needs to be, but two, the Nautilus to create enough space that would disincentivize the J4 from going in, not empowering the Yunara or the Aurelian Soul Wombo, but definitely could have been played to perfection, just was a really high bar to set. In terms of game notes, I just want to say Lulu top and drop the mic. Once the Gwen got put behind, it was just all in focus onto the Sivir from the J4, Lux, Soul, and Yunara. And once Sivir got deleted, it was pretty much game over from that point. The one item I want to call out is the Serpent's Fang built by myself on the J4. In hindsight, somebody needed to go Serpent's Fang with all the shielding. I think it probably would have been better on the, I'm going to say this, the Lulu top with Hurricane, just so that way it could apply a little more frequently. I think that's probably would have been better than the Hull Breaker, and I know this sounds a little bit crazy coming out of my mouth, but I don't think it makes sense on the Yunara needed to continue investing that gold into heavy crit carry items. But regardless, we were able to get one into the comp, and this was something to where a lot of early fights just did not go our way due to unfortunate circumstances and maybe just greed, if you will. The first fight in the river, we did have a Ruling Soul run out of mana, which felt really bad. And then very similar down into the bot try, I believe, our Yunara ran out of mana to where the extended fight might have been able to get cleaned up. So to start the game, having your two carries run out of mana and the fights not go your way really did not feel the greatest. But I think we did a really nice job of saying, hey, I know this didn't go how we wanted it to, but we understand how to execute this comp, and I was really proud of the comps on that one. Looking at game two, diving into the draft, not a surprise seeing the Jinx B1 come out, anticipated that as well. But we really understood that knowing that Jinx was coming, we need to either build a stronger front to back comp or a comp that's able to dive and get on top of these carries, and we shockingly went for the latter of the two. But the really key piece of this is we found a dive comp that still enabled the carries, specifically the Kai'Sa and the Seraphine, to contribute during that dive. The Kai'Sa ultimate to be able to follow the engage, whether that's the Ornn ultimate, the Bard ulti, or the Volley jumping in, the Seraphine ulti on top with the layers of CC. I think it just felt like a really cohesive unit playing around those ultimates as well. We gave over the Silver Spade Nico. Please shoot me. Don't want to have that ever happen again. A ton of pressure put onto this backline. I think in hindsight, potentially an Alistar would have been really good to deal with that. But I think the Bard is just a strong performer from Clue week in and week out, and knows that we are able to flex those muscles and play the map to the mid or the jungle and support duo that how we want to. The Seraphine Volley combo, big fan myself. I think it enables a lot of early skirmishes, especially around one item, to where there's so much CC layering, there's so much empowering, there's so much point and click lockdown. I really like that playing around mid and jungle. But overall, I think the story of the draft in this one is being able to get Clue onto another carry performance, whether that's a hard engaged champion or on their Bard. I really love to see that. Some game notes for this one. Back-to-back games where we fought way too much early, and I think specifically it was with the greedy Volibear build that I went, knowing that the Cosmic Drive into the Flicker Blades, it was such a gold-intensive build, and we had actually talked about this going into the game, and we just let the tempo get way too fast early, and the Mumu and Jinx and Nico were able to capitalize. That was a really strong comp by them. To execute. Once they got one fight or one kill in the fight, we're able to accelerate from there. But once we were able to get some MR on the Volibear, really was able to have that godlike syndrome to where you have the Seraphine healing, you have the engage coming out from the remainder of your team, and I can just focus on right-clicking and pressing buttons. It felt fantastic. But I say that, and somehow Frog still hard carried with the amount of damage, with the amount of kills, with the amount of gold influx. So really big shout out to Frog showing up week in and week out and showing that from an AD performance can carry whether the investment is there or not, especially with these early picks in the draft. I think the Wombo for the Engineers, I want to give a shout out. Very well executed early, especially in that level 6 to 11 range. I believe it was the first dragon, if not the second, where we were able to secure the dragon, but the fight that happened afterwards, just press R, press R, press R, and everybody wipes off the face of the map. That was something to where the Amumu Nico Oriana ults and getting that Jinx reset was huge and really kind of triggered some PTSD for us in terms of this cannot happen again, trying to find those picks ahead of time. Don't let that 5v5 happen. Some series thoughts. The first 2-0 of the season always feels really good, especially against another undefeated team. There was only 3 going into the week, and now only 1 remains. Huge shout out to Fanfear, the E-sub with no time to spare, leading to the additional ban loss in game 1. But the Lulu carry into the Ornn tank duty game 2, and just consistently preaching whatever is best for the team, they will show up and do. Fit the vibes perfectly. I think we all had really fun this week despite the circumstances. And I think for me, a humble brag, but this is how the draft for the player draft for me really wanted to set up, to where Clue and I are able to partner, run the map, but empower our teammates to look towards their carry performances. And Frog, again, I can't say this enough, is consistently showing up and showing out and putting a reasonable claim in for top ADC in the league as well. I know in the post-game interview, I definitely let it hang out a bit, but I believe in every single one of these players, and it's really fun to play with as well. The vibes are immaculate. And last shout out for me, I think Chime also has been a under the radar dark horse in terms of their picks every week. In terms of our draft prep, is how can the picks from mid empower everybody else, and how can they bring the late game value to the team fights as well. So whether that is on the Seraphine, whether that is on the Lux or the Aurelian Soul, or anything that we throw Chime's way, really appreciate that consistent performance as well. Some thoughts around the rest of the Dragon League back-to-back weeks where I was able to predict the correct score outcomes in terms of 2-0s, 2-1s, but unfortunately not the winning team. So I'm halfway there. I'll continue to try to lock in. I think biggest surprise for me was the Frigs 2-1 over the Drizzlers. Now, I think a lot of this, and this seems to be a theme every single week, Scuttle players, remember, your Mondays are booked. But no Zodiac this week, and Zodiac is a player who brings a lot of value to in-game comms, so it's really hard to kind of quantify that value. But shout out to the Frigg solo laners across the board, being able to capitalize, and Bjorg slowly but surely climbing up that MVP tier list for me so far. For me, in the top 5, I'd say. And not knowing Bjorg before this going into it, I think is really demonstrating that opportunity for a top laner to put their mark on the league, which we've seen several seasons and several matchups so far. Shout out to Unkindness in season 1 of HODL, and we're continuing to see Bear in season 2 kind of lock into form leading into the championship performance, but like to see this performance from Bjerg so far. Cheesers are on the board. I know that I definitely talked down on them last week, was not the biggest supporter, but they're able to come through and specifically outperform going against Metro's AD mids, the Wukong. Now, the performance was still there, and you'll see it in the statistics in a little bit, having the damage numbers, the kills, just the overall impact on the map from a mid laner. This is absurd. Now, I did not see this coming. Again, unfamiliar with Metro coming into the season. But really love to see that performance as a jungler, having a mid laner who, 1, can pinch the other enemy jungler's pool, but 2, just have so much prio and ability to play on the map. That is fantastic. But somehow the Cheesers were able to still come through. I would have loved to see this series have Verja in all 3 games. Honestly, think it would have been a different outcome, a different side of the 2-1. But a win's a win, and that is exactly what the Cheesers were looking for, to be able to come out on top. Let me see if I can pull that up. So if we look at some of the games, again, very strong performance from the bot lane, specifically in game 1. We're looking at game 2, where the Wukong mid was able to pop the hell off. Doesn't even need the Ignite, was able to take the TP and still dominate. Rin on the carry, power farm jungle, not a surprise. And then in game 3, able to flip on its head. Big shout out to the Malzahar mid. being able to just lock down somebody and be able to focus. I think this was a really cool composition from the Cheesers in Game 3, and just what a slobber knocker of a 44-minute game. So love to see that as well. Diving into the Ewoks, getting the 2-1 victory over the Beaver Battalion. I want to start here with Game 1 in terms of this looked rough, and I think this could have been the nail in the coffin for a lot of teams, specifically with how the start to the season went. Really not ideal for the Ewoks against my lowest rated team in Game 1, not having a strong performance, having a sub in the support role, which is super impactful for the team. And shout out to the bot lane, specifically 8 times. I'll get into it on the Summit page, but wanted to be highlighted for their carry performances. So here it is for Game 1, really showing up and showing out. But something just clicked for the Ewoks diving into Games 2 and 3, specifically in that mid and bot lane. And shout out to Angel, similar to Rin, being able to get on that comfort power farm. I know the Mordekaiser and Lilia were banned, but throw them on Mundo. Throw them on anybody who's able to really just farm and impact the game later on. And that is where Angel is going to shine. And I think they were able to really showcase that as well. I don't think I would have ever anticipated an 0-2-2 scoreline for King of Spades, and specifically Anna York. But that's just how the game went, and a win's a win again. And looking at Game 3, getting thrown onto Ornn duty, but this is something to where I think it's really impactful for a team to be able to neutralize what the other team wants to do and it still fit your play style. And this is something that played into their hands in Game 3 for the Ewoks. They were able to disengage super well despite just having the Volibear and the Leona on the Beaver Battalion. There really wasn't a lot of threat, and when they did get onto the back line, you had the Poppy W, you had the Lysandra self-ultimate opportunity, you had the Ornn peel. It was just a really well-based composition. I think if Angel got behind early this game, I would have been very concerned about the lack of AD, especially if the Volibear got rolling. I think the Iceborne, and let me move my camera so you can see it, the Iceborne second item was rather interesting. Just with the lack of AD and knowing that the Trundle was going to steal the armor anyway. But shout out and credit is given where credit is due. So want to give a shout out to the Ewoks on that one. I think looking at the standings one more time, it's really nice to see some of that parity continue to maintain throughout the league. And this is something I anticipate going forward as well. I truly believe at this point, and I have for weeks, any team in Dragon can beat anybody. So I love to see that. A quick look at Summit stats. So the team of the season so far, we have Grimorbid in top. I was able to slide into the jungle role. Metro continues that mainstay in the mid. And Frog over here at the ADC really supplanting themselves onto the league. And Silver Spade maintains that in support. I don't think anybody's surprised there. A quick highlight for some stats across the league. Metro continues, and I alluded to this earlier, continues to dominate in a lot of the key carry categories. Most kills, up there for peak strand score, up there for damage per minute. Really just showing how a carry can show up week in and week out. Looking at most deaths, this is some of the shout outs I'm going to give 8 times. Coming in second place for most deaths, kudos to you. But genuinely, I wanted to transition that into the average strand score conversations, coming in second as well there. Maybe a lot of deaths for 8 times, but I think that is exactly how they need to continue playing week in and week out for this Beaver Battalion squad, to continue going for that feast or famine mentality. They still can take down any team any week, and looking forward to that. Some other things from across the league, shout out to Panther being in the top 10 as well as Rin for assists. You don't see that a lot from a jungler, so really big kudos there. And just overall, I think both peak strand score and average strand score tell a lot both about the individual player, but the performances of the teams. And you can see that how it's really locked in step by step for those players as well on there. A couple of other things, specifically looking at CS per minute, and this is, I'll get into it a little bit into my rankings, but Dira and Zoo continue to be in that top 3 in terms of CS per minute. Looking to see the Drizzlers be able to slow the game down, utilize the statistics to their advantage, and let their carry scale into where they need to be. Now, to wrap it up shortly, we have our rankings. Not a lot of change. And to be honest, no changes on this one. I'm going to continue locking in order from top to bottom: penny pinchers, frauds, Ewoks, drizzlers, engineers, frigs, cheesers in seventh, beaver battalion in eighth. I think the biggest chance for swapping is the frigs and cheesers at 6 and 7. But with the frigs performance so far, I have to give them their flowers in that position. And I still think on any given week playing against the frauds, Ewoks, drizzlers, every team should be scared. So they deserve those high rankings despite the standings being what they are. Finally, our week 4 predictions. I do have another week of 3-2-1s. I think this is going to be a very fun week in week 4. I have the Drizzlers going 2-1 over the Beaver Battalion. I think this is going to be another week where 8 times is going to be able to get some hard engage and really shut down the carries in Zodiac and Dira in at least one game. But I think Drizzlers are going to come back with a vengeance, have some really strong comms that are going to slow down the pace of the game, mark any type of engages that are coming through and peel the carries. I'm looking forward to that matchup. It'll be a good one. I think the Engineers are going to 2-0 the Cheesers. Maybe I'm just a hater, and that's A-okay. But I really think the jungle support duo for the Engineers are going to be able to carry this team to a very strong performance this season, and this is going to be another week to really display that. The Frauds, this hurts my soul to say, but I think the Frauds are going to take a 2-1 over the Penny Pinchers. I think specifically their bot lane style plays against us to where they're able to nullify a lot of our aggression, potentially keep Clue in lane. And really, if we make a misstep early, I don't think we're going to have an easy time finding ways back into the game as much as we have so far, despite our missteps in the first 10-12 minutes. I think that just plays into the Fraud style and is a tough matchup for us. And then finally, I think in my match of the week, I am going to put, despite my power rankings, the Frigs 2-1 over the Ewoks. I think this is something as similar to how I just talked about the Frauds being a tough matchup for the Penny Pinchers. I think this is going to be a tough matchup for the Ewoks to where you'll see it flip-flop a little bit. I think Spades in the top lane is going to pop off. I don't think it's going to be enough. And I think it's going to be some really heavy-hitting top laners. Just because Spades pops off doesn't mean I don't think Bjork's going to be able to either. I think this is going to be really interesting, a lot of haymakers back and forth, and I would love to be able to watch this series. So that is it for this week's episode of Compounding Interest. I hope you enjoyed. Hopefully my volume was at a decent level for you all, and I'll catch you next time. Peace out.